For example 2 notes, we are going to be solving absolute value inequalities. There are 2 types of inequalities, compound inequalities that you should have learned when you had algebra. So we're going to make a little note up here what those are. So compound inequalities. You have an and, or you have an or. So ands, this is kind of switched around, but ands are connected. So your 2 circles, they could be open, they could be closed, they're going to be connected. Those are ands. Ors, you still have your 2 circles, but they're going opposite directions when the lines are drawn. Okay? And you can see here, like an or problem actually says or in the problem and in the answer. And you can see your greater than, your less than, they're going opposite ways. Okay, so it makes sense that on a number line they'd be going opposite or away from each other. I tell the students that the O and or, think of it as opposite. Okay, now for ands, when you read this going from x to the negative a, you would say x is greater than negative a. Here you would say x is less than a. So it depends on how you read it to understand your less than or your greater than symbols. All right, so how do we solve? Well, in this example, just like the front of the notes, you have to have the absolute value by itself. So in looking at this, I need this part to be by itself. So I got to get rid of this 2. And to do that, I'm thinking, okay, well, that's 2 times the absolute value of all of that stuff. So the opposite of multiplying would be divide by that. So we're going to have the absolute value of 2x minus 1 less than 5. Now that is the problem that we're going to solve. We're going to work with this. So how do I know if this is an and or an or? So I look at the symbol and that says less than. Well, it's a little play on words. We are going to say less than. Okay, so less than, we know we're dealing with an and problem. So eventually, we're going to have an answer that looks like this for and it would be graphed so that the 2 circles are connected. So how do we do that? Well, first, I simply start with 2x minus 1 here in the center, and I go ahead and put less than 5. But on this side, we're going to keep the same symbol and put a negative 5. I'm going to pause the video and answer that. All right, so now when I put that same symbol, negative 5, just change my sign, I want to solve this as a compound and. So hopefully this is just review. You do not have to draw the lines. I do that with algebra students just to show that there are 3 parts to this problem. So if I were to solve this, I know to add 1 and then divide by 2. I'm going to add 1 to each section and then divide each section by 2. Normally, I would say don't worry about showing the plus 1, plus 1, plus 1. Again, that's okay. You don't have to show it as long as I see that you know you should have a negative 4 here and a 6. So this is what I should be looking for. I would look for this one, this line, and this line. Then I divide everything by 2, and I would get negative 2 less than x less than 3. So what this is saying is that x can be anything from negative 2 to 3. Now, one thing that's not on here that you need to know is the types of closed and open circles. So if this is less than or greater than, it's an open circle. So at negative 2, we'll have an open circle. 3 is also less than, so that's an open circle. Like that. Okay, and then we just connect these. And you do that with making sure that you trace the number line. So I know that x could be a negative 1 or a 2 or even 0. It just can't be a negative 2 or anything below that, or a 3 anything above that, because those are open circles. Which then means if you have a equal to line right here, like this one does, we will end up having closed circles for B. All right, so let's go ahead and tackle B. So for B, again, we have to have that absolute value by itself. Okay, so that means I have to get rid of the 3 and the 9. So the first thing I want to do is I want to subtract my 9. Now, I am showing my steps here because I want to make sure everyone understands what I'm doing. Okay, so 27 minus 9 gives me 18. Now, this looks very similar to this. We need to divide by that 3. And please note, try to make sure that your absolute value symbols don't look like ones. Just make them a little bit longer than the rest of your writing. Okay, so if I divide by 3, we get the absolute value of 2x plus 4 greater than or equal to 6. All right, our absolute value is by itself. And we see that it is greater. So how do we know if we're doing an and or an or? Well, if it's greater, you say greater. Now, greater or greater, what does that actually mean and how you write the problem? So the first thing is this problem, you're going to drop that absolute value and you're just going to write it right here. But this is an or. So the other problem will still be 2x plus 4, but you're going to flip your inequality. So now I'm going to have less than or equal to, and I'm going to have a negative 6. All right, so now we're going to solve both of these. These are just two-step inequalities. So make sure you subtract your 4, and you divide by 2. Okay, obviously we're going to subtract 4 again, and divide by 2. Okay, so now at negative 5, we need to have a closed circle because we have this equal to part, less than or equal to. So I'm going to put negative 5 here with a closed circle. And at 1, I'm going to have a closed circle. Okay, so that kind of worked out perfectly. Negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4, negative. Yep, it works out. All right. So now we're going to go in opposite directions for our arrows. So I'm just going to trace that and extend that line out a little bit. Make sure I have my arrow. So what could x be? X could be 3. X could be negative 7. It just can't be anything here like negative 1 or negative 3 or 0. It can't be this part right here. Okay, the last part, we have a couple story problems to go over. So the weight of each gel pen manufactured in a factory must be 10 grams with a tolerance of 2 grams. One thing that you want to keep in mind is that you want to find the tolerance. So sometimes the problem will give it to you, which is great, and sometimes it won't. So in this problem, it gives it to you. Down here, we're going to actually learn how to find the tolerance. All right, so here it says, write an absolute value inequality that can be used to assess which gel pens are tolerable. All right, so first we know that we're dealing with absolute value for this entire day of notes. So we're going to have absolute value here. And I'm going to use W for weight of pen, and it's 10. Now, it says it has a tolerance of 2 grams, so less than or equal to 2. What is the inequality without using absolute value that represents of the tolerable weight of the gel pen? Okay, so here's the idea. You have this pen and it weighs 10 grams. That's what you want. But a tolerance of 2 grams means it can go below 2 grams or above 2 grams of tin and still be okay. Like we could still manufacture that and sell that pen. So if I add 2 to 10, we've got 12. So 12 grams, if that was what it weighed, it'd be okay to sell. If I weighed it and it was 14 grams, obviously that's more than 12. It wouldn't work out. So it's asking here, can you write an inequality without using the absolute value to show that? Well, if it is less than, that's an and problem. Okay? And an and problem, like up here, we're going to write it like this. So I would say W minus 10 can be less than or equal to 2 or negative 2. Then if I were to add 10 to either of these sides like I'm supposed to, we're going to get 8 and 2. I'm sorry, and 12. 10 plus 2 is 12. So I can see that as long as that pin is between 8 and 12 or 8 and 12, I'm good to go. In letter B, it does not give you the tolerance, so we're going to find the tolerance. So the circumference of a basketball for college women must be from 28.5 inches to 29.0 inches. Can you find the tolerance? So how to find the tolerance is you take these two measurements here, and we're going to subtract them and divide by 2. In doing that, we get 0.5 divided by 2, which is 0.25. Okay, so again, this is your tolerance. All right. Now, what absolute value inequality represents the circumference of the ball? Now, I don't believe it gives us a variable here, so we're going to go with C for circumference. So I'm going to say C minus. Now, this one I think is a little tricky. It says, if you were to have the range 28.5 to 29, what is the middle of 28.5 and 29? It's actually 28.75. Okay, so one more time. This number comes from the middle of this range. So if I had 28.5 on a number line and 29, what's in the middle of those two numbers? That's the middle number. Then that would be less than or equal to 0.25. What is the inequality without using absolute value? So basically taking this and creating that and problem like we did up there. So we've got the middle part. And then, of course, it would be negative 0.25. And then if I were to add the 0.28, 0.75 to here, I'm going to get that 29. If I add this to negative 0.25, I'm going to get that 28.5. So that is my range. Okay, so that is the end of day 2 notes. Make sure that you get on It's Learning and complete your assignment for day 2.